Even competitive players love making their Pokemon shiny sometimes, just because they can. Even the most competitive among us love indulging in the joy of getting to use a shiny for the fun of it. It's only an aesthetic change, but come on, we're Pokemon fans. Who says you can't enjoy that while also trying to be the best like no one ever was? Well, actually, it wasn't always just an aesthetic choice. There have been times where a Pokemon's shiny status has directly affected how it performs competitively. Sometimes a Pokemon must be shiny to unlock something. Other times a Pokemon can be shiny, but really shouldn't. And most of the time, believe it or not, the shiny Pokemon are just straight up worse than their regular forms. So today, we've gathered 5 instances of Pokemon whose competitiveness is affected by whether or not they're shiny. And we're starting in the original shiny generation with Gen 2, as it affects all 251 Pokemon. Ever since the red Gyarados at Johto's Lake of Rage introduced us to shiny Pokemon, provided we weren't lucky enough to run into a shiny beforehand, of course, we've been dazzled by the concept. So many of us have childhood memories of randomly, unexpectedly running into a shiny Pokemon, which then became one of our most treasured. It's an incredible thrill. In Gen 2, there are no shiny restrictions, but you definitely don't want to use any of them, at least if you care about winning. That's because Generation 2 is the only one where any and every Pokemon being shiny automatically affects its stats, and not for the better. A shiny Pokemon suffers a major drop to every single one of its stats except for attack. Gens 3 and onward use a system where a Pokemon's innate potential are characterized by IVs that go up to 31, but in the first 2 gens, they're called DVs and go up to 15. A shiny Pokemon in Gen 2 has DVs of 10 in every single stat except for attack, which must be 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, or 15. So being shiny, you get to keep max attack in exchange for a significant drop everywhere else. Losing these 5 DVs is equal to a 10-point drop to a stat in and of itself, for instance. Snorlax's famous 523 HP stat goes down to 513, which is the same as if it had a base 155 HP instead of 160. Well, is that so bad? Well, yes, it is actually. And would be even if that was a shiny Pokemon's only resultant stat loss. You're already making it easier to take out the most famously KO-averse Pokemon in not just the metagame, but maybe ever. But it gets so much worse when you realize that both its defenses are suffering as well. Oh, and it's already not great special attack stat is now even worse. Worst of all, there's the speed drop. By going shiny, you forfeit any chance at a speed tie with none other than opposing Snorlax, instead being outsped by them each and every time. Nothing like making yourself worse off in such an important mirror match, to say nothing, of course, of how you also take opposing Snorlax's hits worse and don't hit as hard in return. This is just Snorlax too. Everything else suffers even more, especially since unlike Snorlax, most other Pokemon tend to rely on their speed stat quite a bit. And it's not just about speed ties against each other or other Pokemon in their speed tier, like Exeggutor and Machamp. It's about the fact that going shiny effectively bumps you down an entire speed tier. Zapdos goes from always outspeeding Jinx to speed tying with it. Raikou and Starmie do the same with Gengar. This alone would be a deal breaker, let alone the fact that they're all weaker and frailer as well. While many of even the most competitive players enjoy using shiny Pokemon just for fun, they just can't do it in Gen 2. It's a shame because many of Gen 2's shinies are really cool. Snorlax's shiny has never looked better for one, as well as other staples like Cloyster, Nidoking, Steelix, and especially Starmie, but you really shouldn't use them. Unless you're maybe such a Gen 2 hotshot that you need the challenge, because winning with the standard version of these Pokemon is just too easy, and you need your dominant tournament runs to feel rewarding again. Alternatively, maybe it's your Galaxy Brain strategy to psych your opponent out by making them think you're incompetent. In both these cases though, should you be playing a decent Gen 2 player, your lower stats are a near guarantee you'll always be playing catch up, and it's unlikely you'll be able to close the gap. Gen 2 is already challenging enough when everything's on an even playing field, and they definitely fixed this in Gen 3. But we still have 2 problem children with shiny Zapdos and Moltres. Shinies no longer affect your DVs, that are now IVs, in Generation 3, and for the most part, you can use them to your heart's desire without hindering yourself competitively. Tired of looking at Tyranitar and Swampert all the time, but you still need to use them for this super sweet team you're cooking up? Just make them shiny, and it's like they're brand new. This little workaround has saved many a player from choosing a less fitting Pokemon for their team, just to give their eyes a little variety. Sadly, there are some metagame staples that you can't do this for, or well, you can, but the price for this aesthetic is revealing your Pokemon's lack of a certain key move, which allows the opponent to play around you differently with greater safety. Zapdos' Baton Pass is basically used as it would U-turn in later generations, and it's one of the scariest weapons in its arsenal. It scouts the switch in and brings in the best possible response. It's so good at this that when paired with Dugtrio to remove Blissey, as well as other techs like Celebi, Jirachi, and Tyranitar, it has at times been one of the more overwhelming Pokemon in the metagame. Zapdos' checks tend to be slower than it too, so even in a one-on-one Zapdos must escape from, it can baton pass out, which means you can't pull any switches of your own on it. For instance, if you have Zapdos against Snorlax, and you know Zapdos is going to switch to Skarmory, you would love to switch to your Magneton to prevent Skarmory from even getting a layer of spikes, but you can't because Zapdos will baton pass as you switch to Magneton, meaning in effect you are forced to let Skarmory come in on lax and get spikes. This applies to Focus Punch too. Snorlax or Tyranitar forcing Zapdos out should make it a prime opportunity to launch off a predicted Focus Punch, but seeing as a baton passing Zapdos will see the charge before baton passes, it makes it a completely free switch to Gengar, who will take no damage and threaten Will-O-Wisp. And speaking of Will-O-Wisp, it's one of Moltres' greatest tools, spamming it with the Plum en route to its rise from BL to OU, though continued tournament success and usage. It was an adroit burn spammer because it was such a major threat with severely limited switch-ins thanks to a destructive Fire Staff flanked by HP Grass coming off of a Zapdos level power. Even stronger actually, because thanks to its higher accuracy, it could go from the Thunderbolt equivalent Flamethrower up to Fire Blast and even Overheat, while Zapdos wouldn't dare spam Thunder. The few Pokemon that could withstand Moltres' offensive assault halfway decently, like Salamence, Flygon, Aerodactyl, and Tyranitar, were absolutely ruined by a Wisp burn. Even the likes of Blissey and its Natural Cure or Rest Suicune didn't appreciate a Will-O-Wisp in conjunction with Sand and Spikes that Moltres was supported by. Moltres provided a Fire Bomb of an offensive threat and status spreading utility simultaneously and with great ease, firing the move off every time it pivoted into a Metagross. And what do these moves of Zapdos and Moltres have in common? Well, they come exclusively from Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, where there were shadow Pokemon to be snagged from the final boss, Grandmaster Greevil. Flashbacks to how that game is now 20 years old aside, no shadow Pokemon from XD can be shiny, meaning that there is no such thing as a shiny baton pass Zapdos or Will-O-Wisp Moltres. In turn, this means that as soon as you send out a shiny Zapdos or Moltres, your opponent immediately knows that you aren't packing baton pass or Will-O-Wisp respectively, and thus has a much easier time playing around them knowing they cannot be threatened by these moves, which rank among the most impactful. Zapdos and Moltres don't need these moves, especially Zapdos, but actively giving your opponent the advantage of knowing these moves aren't coming is a big deal, especially with something as game-breaking as Moltres' Will-O-Wisp. No decent player would dare switch something like Aerodactyl or Physical Tyranitar into a Moltres with an unrevealed moveset, which you can turn to your advantage when using Wispless Moltres. When you know they don't have it though, playing around it becomes much easier. It's a similar story when you know the Zapdos won't BP. While not as immediately impactful, in some cases that's actually worse because BP and non-BP Zapdos tend to be used on very different styles of team. For instance, it is much more difficult to get Dugtrio onto the field if your Zapdos doesn't BP. If the opponent knows your Zapdos doesn't BP, they know they can likely make some accurate judgments about what the rest of the team is and isn't. And even if they can't, they still know before your Zapdos does anything that no matter what it winds up doing, it won't be baton passing on you. Double switch against it freely. We picked baton pass Zapdos and Will-O-Wisp Moltres as they are far and away the most competitively relevant, but there are many XD exclusive moves this also applies to. For instance, Refresh Salamence is very rare, but as soon as you send out a shiny Mence, your opponent will know that it won't be using it, which may actually affect how they play against certain variants, especially the Dragon Dance Refresh, which has become fairly popular. Refresh was given to a lot of Pokemon through XD actually. Though most of them aren't too competitively relevant, it goes beyond Refresh of course. Heck, Zapdos and Moltres themselves have other competitively worthwhile albeit rare XD exclusive moves that being shiny precludes them from, like Metal Sound and Morning Sun. Others include Heal Bell, Articuno, and Dragonite, and as would later become significant in VGC, Follow Me Magmar. And as we go to the next generation, we have the only Pokemon on this list to actually benefit hard from a shiny event with Raikou and Entei. In the summer of 2010, the Crown Beast event unleashed Raikou, Suicune, and Entei, all of which were locked to a certain nature and received several exclusive moves, the one constant among the trio being Extreme Speed. Of the three, Raikou and Entei became competitive staples, while Suicune fell off, locked as it was to the plus defense minus speed relaxed nature. Not bad, but not exactly fit for using E-Speed, which would be more fitting for a fast, hard-hitting anti-lead, while its other moves were either useless in the cases of Air Slash and Aqua Ring, or banned in singles in the case of Sheer Cold. Raikou and Entei though, they received a serious upgrade. Let's start with Raikou, which was already a renowned threat that had been banned from UU, and with its flagship Substitute Calm mindset, had a respected niche in OU, one so legitimate and relatively common, it not being an official part of the tier seemed strange to some. With this event, it was locked into a rash nature, boosting special attack and lowering special defense. This was nearly perfect. The maxed out special attack was of course a delight, and while the lowering of its naturally good special defense was a shame, it was a perfectly worthwhile price to pay for such an excellent upside, as the lowered special hit taking was far from game breaking given this variant of Raikou Raikou would be adopting an all-out aggressive playstyle, and it had the natural bulk to withstand most special attacks that it needed to from high health anyway. Wait, but didn't Raikou always run a timid nature before? Its Starmie tier 115 speed is amazing, putting it well ahead of the base 110 Gengar and Latias, which was banned at the time of this Raikou's release, but would be unbanned many years later. That was already considered very fast for its ability to outspeed Infernape, which itself was noted for how it left the base 100 standard in the dust. True, missing out on these speed benchmarks was a shame, but base 115 was so fast. Raikou could pull that same Infernape trick of outrunning the base 100 benchmark even without a speed boosting nature, meaning it was still very fast by the metagame standards while reaping the benefits of the full extent of its power, which at the time of its release meant it outsped another dragon orbiting the Banhammer, Salamence. It was so good at this that it wound up inspiring Starmie to run a special attack boosting Modest nature on its choice spec set. Raikou's move pool got an amazing buff beyond just the extreme speed that created a niche for it as an excellent attacking lead in the vein of Machamp, Dragonite, and Metagross, who were using priority to finish off fast stealth rockers like Aerodactyl and Azelf, who were brought down to their focus ashes. Its coverage received one of the best moves it could have asked for, Aura Sphere. This allowed Raikou to utterly obliterate the special defense boosted Sand Tyranitar that was one of its best answers, while also dealing an even heftier chunk to Heatran, the new king of the post-Dragons metagame. Raikou's most defining role became the attacking lead, not just because it beat Focus Sashers, but because it tended to thrash the other attacking leads as well. A Shuka Berry helped against Metagross, while Lumberry let it shrug off Machamp's Dynamic Punch confusion, as well as letting it dominate Rose Raid leads. Speaking of Machamp, Raikou also dominated the Zapdos leads that had become popular in response, and of course ruined the later to rise in usage Gyarados as well. After having forced the opposing lead out, Raikou absolutely obliterated common offensive teams with how, in the face of Aura Sphere, they struggled to utilize the T-Tar Heatran duel that would otherwise check Electrics decently, especially since its go-to Shuka Berry meant it couldn't be forced out or revenge killed by Scarf Flygon either. Event Raikou didn't just have to be an attacking lead either, its Choice Scarf set was also an offense killer, with the amazing benefit of outrunning Scarf Flygon while being a special attacking Scarfer that could actually revenge kill Dragon Dance Tyranitar thanks to Aura Sphere, and actually being so fast that it even outran Dragon Dance Tyranitar with 2 boosts. A 3-attack Calm Mindset was quite vicious as well for how it slashed through defensive teams that were increasingly dropping Blissey in favor of Clefable, which tended to collapse under the weight of a boosted Aura Sphere, and this offensive Calm Mindset lost just about no threat against offense either. After all, it was faster than the standard offensive Calm Mind Jirachi. Entei, on the other hand, was completely lousy. It was genuinely outclassed by Arcanine and Yu-Yu. Arcanine was one of the tier's best Pokemon, and anything Entei could muster was a pale imitation given its near non-existent move pool. The one thing that it could do that Arcanine couldn't was Calm Mind, which actually resulted in its ban from NU, but still was of just about no impact in Yu-Yu. With this event, Entei not only received extreme speed, but Flare Blitz, allowing it to finally utilize its previously wasted attack stat, and best of all, this Entei was locked into an adamant nature, which was just about perfect. Yeah, I wanted to use HP Grass to smack certain quad weak targets like Rhyperior and Kabutops, but it would get the job done anyway. Funnily enough, even after receiving Flare Blitz and E-Speed, Entei was just seen as even more of a discount Arcanine, whose Intimidate and Morning Sun made it an amazing defensive Pokemon, while the offensive sets with Flash Fire can make it an even more punishing threat. Entei was only 5 base points faster and stronger than Arcanine, which wasn't seen as sufficient to outweigh Arcanine's other advantages. Eventually though, while Arcanine was still unquestionably the better Pokemon overall, and whose flagship bulky sets Entei couldn't hope to match or replicate, players began to utilize Entei's unique talents in the form of its attacking lead set. The higher speed and power was nice, but what was really notable was the coverage that it wrought from Stone Edge, letting it absolutely dominate Moltres and threaten opposing Arcanine. Attacking lead Entei became an excellent Yu-Yu Pokemon and inspired players to re-examine its substitute Calm Mind sets, which had nothing to do with its event moves, but wound up being some of the tier's most terrifying pressure stallers that were also sweepers in their own right, even occasionally dropping Calm Mind and diving into Subtoxic, just like Moltres with Protect over Roost. It was the optimal move to always make Entei shiny though, even on these Calm Mind sets, so your opponent wouldn't necessarily immediately know which set you were as soon as you were sent out. Not that mid to late game Entei was expected to be anything other than sub and lava plume spam, but it couldn't hurt. In the same vein, it was optimal to always make your Raikou shiny in OU, even using sets like Protect Calm Mind, so your opponent wouldn't know that you didn't have Aura Sphere. Now this could be quite a psych out. A Tyranitar refusing to switch into a Raikou for fear of Aura Sphere that it doesn't even have, and thus letting Raikou cause destruction even when there's a Pokemon that actually takes its hits quite well that was still around on the other team. Technically, you could say the same for Suicune, although you wouldn't fool anybody into thinking that you had extreme speed on it. And on the off chance you did, well, your opponent probably would thank you. This actually lends us to a problem that's never been implemented on simulators that have long since been the lifeblood of competitive singles, especially for past generations. Event Raikou, Entei, and Suicune were released in a Cherish Ball, a Pokeball which is only available from events. Thus, in-game, you would know it was an Event Raikou as soon as it came out, not because it was shiny, but because its Pokeball was a Cherish Ball. As soon as a Raikou comes out of anything besides a Cherish Ball, it doesn't matter if it's shiny. No Cherish Ball, no Aura Sphere or Extreme Speed. That sounds like quite an oversight, and it is, but it is ever so slightly redeemed by the fact that in nearly all cases, it is extremely obvious what set Raikou or Entei for that matter is going to be. Most Raikous seen competitively since its release have been Event Raikou with Aura Sphere, usually at lead, where the greatest mystery is not whether or not it's packing Aura Sphere, but if it's holding Lumberry or Shukaberry. And even for the brief period where Combine Protect sets were popular, those were metagame sweepers with leftovers, whose position as such you knew it wasn't going to be running Aura Sphere. You'd be more concerned with the fact that it was timid-natured and would thus outspeed your Gengar and Infernape. Similarly, lead Entei in UU is always unleashing its Flare Blitz E-Speed in the lead slot and hitting from the special side outside of it. Still, this does mean that with the methods used to play Gen 4 OU, you can fake an event or non-event Raikou in a way that is impossible in-game. It hasn't affected any major tournament games since Raikou in and of itself is not nearly as common as it once was in OU, but it still certainly could. But the same can't be said for Gen 5 Genesect. In Gen 5, a shiny event Genesect was released that, similarly to the legendary beast, locked it into a certain nature, the speed boosting defense lowering Hasty in this case, and provided it with some excellent moves that it couldn't obtain otherwise in Blaze Kick, Shift Gear, and Extreme Speed. However, by the time this event Genesect came out, it had long since been banned from OU, which it effortlessly destroyed without the need of these moves. It was also ripping up Gen 5 Ubers, but it did so with a Choice Scarf set that had no need for these moves. Sure, it seemed good on physical Scarf variants with Blaze Kick on teams with support of Groudon's Permanent Sun, but even with max attack investment, Flamethrower was the better move for avoiding Ferrothorns' Iron Barbs, as well as targeting Skarmory on its weaker defensive stat. When Gen 6 rolled around though, Genesect returned to OU against the wishes of many to spend its relatively brief tenure in the tier wreaking havoc Terminator style. And this time, these event moves finally got to rear its head, which was particularly impressive considering Genesect revealed it had them before actually using them. Even though it had the same event-only Cherish Ball deal that wasn't actually implemented on simulators, you actually immediately knew it was hasty-natured and could be packing at least one of Extreme Speed, Blaze Kick, and Shift Gear by virtue of the fact that it was shiny, as any Genesect not from this specific event could not be shiny, in accordance with the shiny locks first introduced by Gen 5. However, Genesect was so busted, even knowing what it would do did little to help you out. And of course, it didn't hurt that there was still plenty of mystery as to what it was specifically going to run. An all-out attacking Focus Sash set like the one from Gen 5 OU was quite popular, just with Extreme Speed now, which let it do things like beat Talonflame's Brave Bird to the punch, and its old Rock Polish set could be replaced by Shift Gear for a mixed twist on its previous late-game sweeper. But a new set emerged as well, with Event Genesect now brandishing Choice Band for the first time, with Steel Stat more valuable than ever in the wake of Fairy types being added to the game. Its famously flinch-happy Iron Head that had caused so many headaches on its Scarf set in Gen 5 Ubers was now even more nightmarishly powerful than before, as was its signature U-turn, and flanking these two stabs were both Blaze Kick, ensuring no non-heat ran Steel type could ruin its fun, and being able to run a Choice Bander that made such complete mincemeat of Mega Scizor was especially terrifying, and of course Extreme Speed, which rendered most revenge killing null and was a ferocious late-game cleaner that required no setup, especially if that download attack boost kicked in. Genesect commonly being shiny narrowed its options down some, but even if you somehow knew exactly what set it was running, it was so powerful with these event moves, it was probably going to mow you down anyway. Well, it would also do that even without the event moves, but there really is little terror like a Choice Band Extreme Speed from a Genesect that gained a +1 attack just for switching in. And before we move on to our final shiny affected choice, we've got some honorable mentions. First, in Generation 5, Rayquaza also received V-Create from an event, but Cherish Ball problems notwithstanding, this Rayquaza cannot be shiny as a result, which is a shame because shiny Rayquaza is extremely cool. There are also many Pokemon that have been shiny locked across the generations. Gen 3 players often bemoan being unable to use shiny Celebi, while all the way up to Gen 9, the likes of Koraidon and Miraidon are unavailable, among many others across the gens. Volcanion, Magearna, many Paradox Pokemon, and seeing how many seriously cool shinies you can count among these ranks, it's a real shame. Think Kevin Garnett and Uncut Gems, how he yells, "Why would you show it to me if I can't have it?" at Adam Sandler. an apt stand-in for Game Freak if there ever was one. KG being the voice of the Pokemon player base aside, we move on to our final shiny affected Pokemon, itself a great tragedy of superb design gone unused with Ash Greninja. Gen 7 Greninja is an incredible Protean threat, a word that we, like most of the player base, most likely learn through its ability, as it changes its type on the move it uses on that turn, effectively giving it stab on every attack and letting it do ridiculous things like use spikes to block Volt Switch. However, we are not just referring to Greninja's literal Protean ability here. In fact, this whole dilemma is based on the fact that it might not have it, as in Gen 7 it gained another amazing ability in Battle Bond, which sacrifices Omni Stab in favor of, should Greninja use direct damage to KO an opposing Pokemon, it will transform into Ash Greninja, a terrifying, fast, and powerful threat. And if you could start the battle in this form, Ash Greninja would be insanely broken and a terror in even Ubers. We're referring to Greninja as a Protean threat in the literal sense of the word, because of how it can easily use its Protean or Battle Bond sets on any given team. No matter how much you think it's one of them, it could just as easily be the other, and the ability to fake one makes it even more terrifying. Heck, Greninja's Protean set is Protean in the sense that even when you know this is the ability it's using, you still don't know what's in its endless array of coverage that it's going to threaten you with, and it can vary its 4 moves to what feels like infinite levels. So really, that first turn against Greninja is key, because before that, you don't know which of its 2 abilities is running, and that's where the shiny dilemma kicks in. Protean Greninja can be shiny just fine. Battle Bond Greninja, on the other hand, can only be obtained through the Sun and Moon demo, and it can't be shiny. Thus, as soon as you send out a shiny Greninja, your opponent knows that you're not threatening Battle Bond. It actually goes further than that. Ash Greninja must also be male, meaning that a female non-shiny Greninja signifies Protean all the same. As such, to not give itself away, even Protean Greninja must be both male and non-shiny. This is a real shame because shiny Greninja is extremely cool, and what's more, shiny Ash Greninja would be even cooler. KG's lament echoes in our ears as we wonder why Game Freak Sandler has left us to suffer so. Both Greninja and Ash Greninja's regular designs are great as they are, of course, but it's a shame nonetheless. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Gameslayer, Nurse Jake, Pretzel SP, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine for their major support of our videos.